Hey, friends. Welcome to the Gathering Podcast. My name is Rebecca Reed. I'm one of the interns here at the Gathering. And basically, this podcast is just a space for students and faculty of the river to come and kind of just have conversations about things that may not be talked about on Tuesday nights. So today our topic is, I could have come up with a better name, but I didn't. It's stumbling slash going off the road. So, as college students, we have those, when we come into the semester, we're super fired up for the Lord. And then, we're going to church 3 times a week. We're doing all this stuff. And then over the weekend, or not the weekend, over winter break or summer break, we don't have that. And so just trying to figure out how to maintain that and balance that and keep that fire for the Lord that we have during the semester. So today I'm here with Paul Stouder. I am so confused on what his position is here at the church, but he is awesome. And so I'm going to let Paul talk a little bit about who he is and what he does here at the church.
Yeah, I'm also confused about what my position is. So I am the Connections Director at the River Community Church, and been on staff for almost a year, and do a few different things, mostly helping getting first-time guests and just anybody interested in taking next steps, kind of facilitating those processes. Oversee our baptisms, oversee our leadership development, and the only thing that's relevant to this podcast is that I help out with the Gathering. I get the privilege of coming alongside Alex, who's the pastor over the Gathering, and just, hanging out with students and, just hanging out, get to know you guys. It's been really fun so far, I think, just to see how God's moved in the last year. And I get to be on a fun podcast.
Yeah.
With Becky.
That's with Becky, yeah. So you just heard what we were talking about today. This is kind of a topic I came up with while driving to the Gathering one night. And I was like, wow, I feel like all my friends are gone during the summer and I do not know how to stay in the same spot or like further my relationship with the Lord when I'm not in a small group and I'm not doing this and all I'm doing is working at my school and all this stuff, and I feel like I don't have time. So the first question I kind of have for you, you were a college student once, not that long ago.
Long time ago.
So the first question I kind of have for you, and kind of the only question, is what do you think are some practical ways to just further your faith with the Lord during kind of those off seasons?
Yeah, I think so. So I became a Christian in college, and so I remember those first few seasons of being kind of like off time. Like the college ministry I was a part of, like wasn't meeting, and so you've like got community and everything's really solid, and then all of a sudden it's finals week, and then like everybody splits, and I think just to press into kind of what that season looks like, typically, like I think if we're still maybe younger in our faith, or even if we're more mature, that season can be pretty difficult. You can feel isolated. It's super easy to feel isolated, I think, during those seasons. I remember experiencing just a lot of temptation. So, I'm not in community. I don't really have any accountability around me, and just remember experiencing a lot of temptation, I think, especially because I'd just become a Christian, of like, hey, do you remember that old life that you were living? And so I felt a lot of pull in those seasons. And I think that speaks to a couple things. I think it speaks to, one, that we need community, that this thing that Jesus has called us into is best lived out in community, right? And sort of the blessings, well, I won't say the blessings and the curses, but like the pros and the cons of college ministry specifically is that college ministry gives you a community. of people that are in your life stage, that you're all kind of going through the same thing together. And so it's really easy to get connected, right? The challenge with college ministry is that it's a part of the church, but it's not the church. And so I think it speaks to how necessary the church is in your life while you're in college. And when I say the church, I'm not specifically meaning a Sunday morning worship service, though that's part of it. I'm meaning like the greater part of the church, right? Not just the college ministry, but the wider area of the church, that you're connected somehow, not just this group of students who are here in the fall and spring and dip in the summer, but you're connected in the life of a local church where like you've got people that are older than you, that know you, that love you, that are for you, that are pouring into you. And maybe even you've got people that are younger than you, in their faith that you're investing in. So I think and some of that's hard, right? So for some people, they go home. So, they've got a church they go to while they're at school, and they're part of their college ministry, and they're going to the church, and then they go home. So, like, because you went home this summer, right?
I did. Yeah.
You did, yeah. And I think that's the challenge, is you leave your community for a season. And that's a tough place to be. I think I think cultivating the community at home, if you can, could be a way to deal with that. I think too, like, maybe having some people that while you're at school, right, while you're with your local church and plugged into your college ministry, that you've got people that are like checking in with you throughout the summer, that you've got some accountability, or maybe it's your small group, maybe it's, but you've got people that are, I think our participation in community is sort of on us. Like, we get out of community what we put into it. So, right. So if you're not making the effort to lean in when you go home,
Yeah.
right, and still embrace your community that you do have, then yeah, I think it's easy for you to feel isolated and start to struggle, because you've maybe believed the lie that, like, well, my community's out of reach right now. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think physically it can be true, right? They're not in the same physical space as you anymore. But I think relationally, like, you can still enter into those spaces through FaceTime, through a text message, and still, I think, feel connected, even if, home is a place where you don't have a lot of community, or you haven't been able to cultivate community.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me, when I went back home, so before I came to college, I'm a sophomore now, or I'm a junior now. That's crazy. Before I came to college, my community in Smyrna was just kind of like there, but it wasn't like there. It wasn't the way it is now in Cookeville. And so going back home kind of just feels like I only go back home for my family. Like, if like my family was out of the picture, I would never go back home to Smyrna, because it just feels like they're the only thing there for me. And of course, I have a church back home that I love dearly, and my family's been with them since we moved to Tennessee. But all of the people there, it just kind of feels like I don't belong there anymore, so to speak. Because it's me, and I'm the oldest from our youth group, and then there's 3 other people there who now all go to the same school, and I'm just kind of like, whenever I go back, it just kind of feels like I'm an outsider almost, because they're all there and they're talking about, oh, hey, like, when we go back to school tonight, do you guys want to eat, or do you guys remember that funny thing that happened? And like, and I'm ecstatic that they found that community where they are now. But it kind of has me wishing that I have that community with them almost. And so I think that's really like the tough thing about it, for me, is I am such I love people so much, like I feed off of people. And or I feed off of their energy. I probably should have said that. That sounds better. But when I go home and none of that is there, it's really easy to like get down on myself and just to go back into that same mindset of, oh, I went to church on Sunday, check the box. Oh, I took communion, check the box. Do you know what I'm kind of saying?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the sense of belonging is huge, right? And college is a weird time.
Absolutely.
So I remember being in college and being an upperclassman and seeing freshmen. It was inevitable that freshmen every year were like going home every weekend
Oh yeah.
and driving like 2 to 3 hours to go see mom and dad. And I think, I don't know, I was actually just having a conversation this morning with somebody. Our experience with adulthood, and I don't know if this is the thing to lean into right now or not, but here we go. Our experience with being initiated into adulthood in the West, in American culture, is often very delayed. So if you look most cultures prior to ours, a lot of ancient cultures, there was sort of like a trajectory into adulthood, and it started at a younger age than we typically do. And so kind of the typical American narrative, right, is you're a kid until your 18th birthday, and then all of a sudden you're an adult, and you gain all of these legal rights to be considered an adult, but you're still pretty dependent on your parents, dependent on your family situation. And so there's this kind of delayed trajectory into adulthood to where, like, honestly, I think for many college students, you don't start feeling like you're an adult or maybe even acting like you're an adult until after you graduate college, get a full-time job, start providing for yourself in some way. And so I wonder, and this is just a theory, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I wonder if how much time, right, we spend at home during college, and why we don't just stay plugged into the community. Some things you can't help. If you're living in the dorm and you can't stay in the dorm in the summer, I mean, you got to go home.
Yeah.
You got to sleep somewhere. But I wonder if, because we've got this cultural kind of push to say, you know what, I'm going to be dependent on mom and dad until I'm done with school. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But part of college is you're finding your own community. And I think the more you can stay tethered to that community, I think maybe the better you'll fare, right? The more you can begin to say, you know what, this is where I feel like I belong, right? This is the community that God has me in. I still want to go see parents. I still want to go see family, but maybe I don't need to stretch it out over so long. Maybe there's a way, right, for me to stay more connected to the community that God has me in, where I've actually got people that know me and can walk with me, and I feel like I belong, rather than going back to this place where you're not part of that community anymore, right? You're not involved in people's lives like you used to be. You're not. People don't know you there, right? You've been away for a year, and college is typically a time where you go through a lot of transformation. Like you start discovering who you are, and I think especially in regards to like our relationship with Jesus, if you grew up in the church, your faith starts to become your own. And so I think I would push us to just, man, if you can maybe tighten the grip on the community that God places you in while you're in college, and maybe say, you know what, I'm gonna sacrifice some more time away from family, to make sure that I'm still able to be faithful to Jesus in these in between spaces, because that's what adult life is like. I mean, like, it's going away for a summer is not a normal thing that you do after college. Like leaving the community that you belong to is not a normal rhythm of life after college. Um, you know, it's, you go see your parents when you can, you go on the weekends, you go for an afternoon, and that's kind of just life. And so I think the earlier we can kind of embrace that, like, okay, I want to start preparing for what life's going to be like the rest of my years. If we can do that in college, I think those in-between spaces will get less difficult, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So you know this. I'm an SOA, so student orientation assistant at Tennessee Tech, and one of the questions that we get asked the most, and it's not by students, so it's only by parents, is like, how do I help my student find this community in college? And like, oh, we're Christians. He or she grew up in the church, and we just don't know where to start in college. And how do I do that? And like, how do I make sure they don't feel homesick and that they're not coming home often? And the answer that we always give them is to just stay at college. Like, because I know I had friends that moved into their dorms, and then the weekend after that, they're like, okay, well, I moved in, now I'm going to go home. And it's like, those weekends are like, especially like the first weekend, it's when everyone is going out and trying to meet new people. And so now, like, you've missed it, not like completely missed it, but a lot of students find it easier to go out and meet people and find that community when other people are trying to do that too. And so instead of like going to that trivia night in the middle of the semester where like everyone is going with a bunch of people that they already know, you could have gone to that trivia night at the beginning of the semester when everyone doesn't know anyone. And it just makes it a lot easier. I know it does for me. But yeah, I definitely think, I've never thought about it like that. I definitely think leaning into that community that you have in the town that you're going to school in is definitely going to help in the long run, especially because, I mean, you never know what God's going to do in your life. You may end up staying. I may end up staying in Cookeville,
Yeah.
and who knows? And if I haven't been leaning into that community, then like, excuse me, then like trying to find it as an adult after college is done, it's going to be so much harder than trying to find it
Yeah,
as
and
a student.
I'll say, like, college is one of the easiest times in your adult life that you'll actually be able to find community.
Yeah.
Because there's a place where everybody is.
Yep.
And everybody's looking for the same thing. That's why there's fraternities and student organizations and student ministries. Like, everybody's looking for a tribe to fall into. And that's so just openly available because everybody in that season of life, you're likely not married, you don't have kids, you're probably not working full time. And so you've got space for relationships that, like, after college, making friends becomes a lot harder, but it's still on you. So like I said earlier, like, you get out of community what you put in, and that's as you become an adult. Like, so my wife and I, we got married my senior year, and I graduated. We moved to North Carolina. We knew a handful of people. We moved for grad school, and it was on us. to find community. And then a year later, we moved to Portland, Oregon, and we knew one person. We literally knew one person in a city of 2 million people.
Yeah.
And it was on us to cultivate community. Now, should we as Christians be trying to like welcome people in that are new and be hospitable? Yes, that's a calling we have. But I think just as much, like if we know, I think this is particularly hard for us as in our current cultural moment, because everything in our culture pushes us towards individualism. Everything in our culture pushes us towards distanced relationships. I mean, you think about social media, how we do dating now, that it's online, it's accessible, I don't have to get involved. And so there may be a bit of fear there too, that like maybe home's a safe place where like I don't have to enter into the messiness of relationships. I don't know. Or maybe I can go back to relationships where I know it's safe. But college is this time where like you're going to have the easiest time making friends, and you're probably going to make friends that you'll keep for a lifetime. Most of my closest friends in my 30s are people that I've met in my 20s while I was in college. And so I think looking at it as if I'm not just investing in community for right now so I don't feel lonely or I don't feel isolated, which is a huge reason. I'm investing for my future.
Mm-hmm.
I'm investing so that when God calls me somewhere else, that I've got people that I can call and lean into that know me when I'm entering into these spaces where I don't know anybody. Because God may call you to a city where like you get a job, you move there, you're single, you don't know anybody. You've got to find a way to like make friends. And it's hard, but it's like so much of Christianity. I think that's why Christianity is particularly interesting to live out in our culture. Is it's such a communal faith. When like the majority of the New Testament was written to a group of people, it wasn't written to the majority of it wasn't written to individuals. And so I think if we can lean into this identity or this idea that community is good for me and I need to invest in community and still love my family, right? Still love my hometown. I mean, we're in the South. People are all about their hometowns.
Oh, yeah.
But I think if I can see like I need community, I need to learn this now so that when I get out of college, I've already got the skills and the friendships that are going to help me walk into this next season with confidence, that knowing like, you know what? Loneliness is an option. Isolation is a choice. So we have to choose to fight against isolation, choose to fight against loneliness and embrace the community that God puts around us, whether or not that's the most comfortable thing for us to do or not.
Yeah. So kind of on the topic of friends and community, another question I kind of had is, and we touched on this a little bit, but kind of going deeper into it, so you're the friend of someone who you can kind of notice is maybe pulling away from God in that off season or in any season. What are kind of some ways that you think a friend can be a friend to them, but also be like, hey, get back on this path, you know?
Yeah, this is hard, right? This is, I think I've been given a unique vantage point because I see this not just in friendships, but in my job, right? I see people who will come to faith and are super excited and like God has genuinely moved in their life, and then they just pull out. So I think a few things. One, prayer is, and it sounds like the cliche answer. Prayer accomplishes a lot more than what we give credit for. I read a really good book recently where the author talked about how it's not that we don't believe prayer works. It's that we actually don't put in the effort to see prayer work.
Yeah.
We don't labor in prayer, right? We're not praying continually, daily for situations or things going on in our lives that we really need God to show up in. So I think, like, don't underestimate what God can do just through you asking him to do it. Because that's all it is. Like, you're asking him to do it, and that takes 5 seconds. Second, I think embrace that person as much as you can, right? I think we need to be comfortable with leaning in. Paul talks about, I think it's Galatians, we're to bear one another's burdens, right? And so part of bearing burdens is locking arms with somebody when they're walking through a rough season. I had friends, my first couple of years of Christianity were bumpy at best. And I had friends that came alongside me and were empathetic through like the things I was trying to figure out, because I'm a baby Christian, right? So there's compassion there. There's like, okay, you're still learning to walk. That's okay. But at the same time, pushing me towards like, you are so much more, like there's so much more that that can be found in Christ than what you're experiencing right now. And so don't pull back, lean in, because I think God will, if we allow him, remove the things in our hearts, right, that want to pull us away from him. And a lot of that removal process is painful. That maybe he's stripping away some insecurities or some idols or whatever it is that we get comfortable to having, and then those things start rubbing up against our relationship with Jesus, and it gets really uncomfy. And so I think pushing them towards like, man, Jesus is better. And I think at the end of the day, if we've done our due diligence to love people where they're at, to push them, there's a saying that's kind of popular in Christian spaces, right? It's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay there. So if we acknowledge that, we're praying, we're doing our due diligence, and still somebody's just pulling back from Jesus, sometimes we need to understand that people are responsible individuals. That they have to make a willful choice to lean in. Like we can't, no matter how bad I want to, I can't change somebody's heart. Only God can. And sometimes it takes them walking through some junk to see, oh, yeah, I really do need Jesus. Sometimes God allows us to walk through the valley, I think, to show us that he's there with us. I see. I would just encourage you, like, if you've got a friend that's pulling back, like, do those things. Pray, lean in, like, address it. Don't be afraid to, like, I think be willing to risk potentially upsetting somebody if it means that their relationship with Jesus is on the line, right? And I say on the line, not that they can lose that, but like,
Yeah.
if you see something, like, speak up. Because this all goes back to what we're talking about, right? It's like, we need community, because you, me, have blind spots that, like, somebody may be walking through something and they don't even see it. That's the man, the scary thing about sin and the enemy that we the spiritual enemy that we have is those things work through deception. And oftentimes we're deceived and we can't even see it. It sounds very, like, spooky.
Yeah, it is.
But it's also very real. Like Paul talks in Ephesians 6, like, we have a real spiritual enemy that's against us, that's warring against our soul. And so sometimes we can have a veil over our eyes and, like, not even see the sin that we're walking in. And so I think we need community to be able to say, hey, do you see this going on over here?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's going to be like, oh, I had no idea. And there's going to be conviction immediately. And sometimes they're like, yeah, I'm working on it. And you just gotta, like I said, you lean in, you do what you can as a friend, as a brother or sister in Christ. But at the end of the day, I think treating people as responsible individuals who make choices, and sometimes those aren't always the best choices, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like fear is definitely a big part of why people may not try to help people that they see pulling away. And maybe even just rejection is like a big thing as well, because no one likes being rejected, and if you think you do, then I don't even know what to tell you. But yeah, rejection is just, it sucks. And so thinking, even with people, if my best friend who has known the Lord for as long as I have, and who is maybe deeper in her faith than I am, has kind of fallen away from that, like, speaking up is so scary, even though I know, like, she believes the same things that I do, but like right now she's just going through this thing, or she's gone back home and she's started hanging out with those friends that she was hanging out with in high school that she shouldn't be hanging out with anymore. Like, telling that person, hey, you're wrong. I mean, obviously a little bit more gentler than that, but telling them that is such a scary thing. Because it's like, sometimes it kind of feels like you're choosing your relationship, your and their relationship with God, over, or like you're choosing between your and their relationship with God as well as your relationship with them. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, which one do I want to protect more? And so sometimes it gets, these blinders come on, and it gets really hard to just tell that person, honestly, just like what they're doing wrong and how they can come back for the Lord. And just, I like saying that actions speak louder than words.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people can go to one of two extremes with this. I think this is somewhat dependent on your personality. If you're a person who loves conflict, you're going to want to tend to go in hot just all the time. And just like, dude, you're screwed up, let me tell you how. I think the other end of the spectrum, right, is I don't say anything because I'm too afraid. I think there's somewhere in the middle that we have to find ourselves, that we have to get to. Because like me, I'm naturally, I avoid conflict. And that's for several reasons, some good, some bad. I don't like conflict. Conflict freaks me out. But I understand that some conflict's necessary. Conflict can actually be a really good thing in people's lives. And so I heard a pastor say one time, you want to handle truth like, not like a club, but like a scalpel. And we want to be really careful with truth. And you're right. Sometimes people don't have the ability to hear truth at certain stages. It's like, I've got a brother, I've shared the gospel with him multiple times. He's not been receptive. And he's not antagonistic, but it just hasn't landed. And I think sometimes we can put a weight on ourselves that's not biblically there, is that I've got to help this, I've got to save this person. I've got to rescue this person from their choices. And that's not your job. Like, there's only one person, like, I hate to sound like super cliche, but like, the only person that can rescue somebody from themselves and from their issues is Jesus. My job as a Christian, so if I'm talking to a fellow Christian, my job is like, hey, we're siblings, so I've got some family responsibilities to you, right? That I need to keep in order to be a good follower of Jesus, in order to love you well. So that means, addressing sin sometimes when I need to. It means allowing myself to be held accountable. Um, it means encouraging you when you're down, praying for you. Like that's right. When it's a non-Christian, my responsibility, talked about this a couple weeks ago at the gathering. Our responsibility in evangelism is not to convert, but to communicate, right? So our goal is conversion. Our goal is for people to trust in Jesus, but it's not our responsibility. God does not hold me responsible for someone's response to the gospel. That weight is not placed upon me. The weight that's placed upon me is I have to open my mouth and speak. And there's some tact to that, right? I need to know, so like my brother, same way, right? I know that I've got to space out the times that I share the gospel with him, or I'm just going to push him away. If every time we talk, I'm like, hey, can I talk to you about the gospel? He's not going to want to talk to me. And then I lose my opportunity altogether. But if over time I'm loving him well, right? Praying for him, praying diligently that God would save him. And then as God brings opportunity, I open my mouth and speak in a loving way. Hey, brother, this is what I want you to know. This is what I want you to believe. Just want to invite you to believe. And pray that God uses that. And just keep leaning into that and trust that. I mean, really good example, my mother-in-law grew up Catholic, sort of knew about church, sort of knew about God. She would say she believed in God at the time. But the gospel, she'd never been transformed by the gospel. Never said yes to Jesus. And when we moved to Portland, because we moved to Portland to serve the church plant, so it was a big kind of like faith move for us. Both of my in-laws were not believers at the time, so it was kind of hard for them to understand. But they were super supportive. My mother-in-law comes to visit us for the first time after we moved to Portland. And we're at church. She's 58 years old at the time. And I'm like serving on the worship team that morning, and she comes up to me in tears in like I don't know, one of those we do weird things as Christians, like fellowship time. I don't know if you grew up in a church, you did fellowship time.
Yeah.
Everybody stand up, greet your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
Really weird. That died with COVID. I'm not sad about it.
I'm not either.
But she came up to me and she's just in tears and she's like, I get it now. And we went back to our apartment and had a long conversation. And like, she actually understood the gospel for the first time. 58 years old. And this was over time of her hearing the gospel, but then like us sharing the gospel with her, us living the gospel out before her, to where it finally clicked. And so I think we've got to have some patience with people and patience with what God wants to do in people's lives. If we're doing our due diligence, I think we've got to be patient for God to work, right? To say, okay, I'm going to believe that eventually this is going to happen. I'm going to have faith that God wants to save this person. I'm going to keep sharing as I have the opportunity. I'm going to keep loving them well. I'm not going to give up. And I'm going to keep praying and trust God's faithfulness over time, because what God wants to do in that person's life may also be something He's trying to do in your life. He may be trying to grow your trust in Him through you ministering to this person. He may be trying to grow your patience through you being patient for this person to come to faith. He may be trying to grow your prayer life, so through you praying every day for 20 years and then seeing them come to faith. And then like, how much greater, right? If you've prayed for somebody for years, how much are you going to trust God and believe God comes through on His word if He does that? And so I think there's a lot more at play here that God's doing when we're loving these people, because God tends to work through us and in us too, as we're learning how to practically love these messy, broken people.
Yeah. That was good. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all I had about this subject. I think you hit it right on the nail. You did a really good job. I did a really good job, got to give myself a pat
Way
on
to
the
go,
back
Becky.
a little bit. Yeah, thank you for coming here and talking with me. I appreciate it. You're welcome here anytime. Thank you for those of y'all who listened. If you have any more questions about this topic that we didn't get to, you know where to find us. So please come and ask us those questions that we have, preferably Paul, because he's a little bit more, theological than I am. But yeah, come and ask us those questions and we'll be happy to answer. But yeah, that's it for this episode.
That's a wrap.
I guess that's a wrap. That's cut. I don't have a good outro, so that's just gonna have to do. So thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Becky.